So look, thank you very much for spending your time with me this morning. I'm delighted to be here. I'm even more delighted to hold this little thing and not know how to work it. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about old people. So we kind of have a funny view of old people in this country and around the world. Like, we sort of have these sort of two ideas, I think, in our heads. The first one is this, it's some lonely old woman. She's probably on the winter fuel allowance. She lives by herself. She lives in black and white. There's no colour in this world. She lives in a nice, unreconstructed 1970s house. And it's miserable, right? And the thing about old people is that they're one of the few people, like horses, caravans, and old people, they need their own signs, And I don't know how many old people you've seen, and they stoop, they don't walk, they all stoop. And obviously the man leads the woman, right? Because that's the way things work, apparently. And look, they're walking to the cemetery too, It's really... What's that all about? It's just fascinating. But why do you have signs for old people? It's just crazy. And then we have another view of old people, which is this. So this sign says, no senior citizen discounts. You've had twice as long to get the money. And this is like a new phenomenon, I think, at the moment, which is, we are going through a difficult period right now, and we're looking at and we're talking about the baby boom generation being people that are born after the war, massive population explosion. But we're really seeing them as people, there's like a trend in the media to talk about them as people who've had it all, and they're taking it from us. They've had universal education, they've had universal healthcare, they made their money in their 80s, they've got their nice properties in the Cotswolds, and it's all because of these people who don't, aren't sharing. I went to a really interesting talk the other day, and it says it's because the over 50s need to stop working and let the under 30s have a go. That they're taking our jobs. And it's a really perverse kind of attitude, I think, that either we look at old people as they're in desperate need and they live in black and white, or that they're filthy rich. And they're stopping us all progressing as a society, and they're like a burden on us. And I think that's the sort of point that I really want to make, which is that increasingly we think about the elderly and old people as a burden, So this is a population pyramid. What it basically shows is numbers of people across different ages. People who study population would say that the idea is it's a pyramid, and increasingly we're moving to a model where it's an inverted pyramid. So you're seeing this kind of lump of people in the middle, and they're getting older and older. And then the idea is you have a younger and younger population, and more people that are older. Almost as if they're crushing the young people, This is kind of weird idea that these are people that are dependent. And this is a term I took from this slide, which I stole from Google. But, we talk about them as dependent. We talk about them as needy. We talk about them as people that are a burden, and we have a welfare bill and a social bill and a health bill, and we have a pensions bill, and it all feels so hard, And I think in terms of what we want to do at The Amazings is that we ask the really, really simple question, that instead of thinking about what older people can't do, instead of thinking about, the price that we pay for this older generation, why don't we think about a different question? Why don't we think about, and this is a question I would ask anybody in this room, do you have a skill, knowledge, or passion that not a lot of people have? And I think if you ask that of people that are in their 50s, who are retiring, who have retired, then always you'll get an answer, which is yes. There's accumulated knowledge there, there's accumulated skills there, there's accumulated experience there. So why don't we focus on that a little bit? Why don't we stop thinking about the burden and start thinking about them as assets? Start thinking about them as a resource, which I think is what ties into the conversation today. So that's kind of what we do, and I'm going to talk to you about it a little bit. So our idea is quite simple. What we offer. It's a website, and what we want to offer to the world is the thought of try something old, learn something new. Try and connect with things that are, I'll show you some examples. So this is Stuart. Stuart is our grandmaster chess player in a gold bow tie. The thing about Stuart, anybody play chess here? He's got a chess rating of about 1700. If you know about chess, that's good. But not only that, he was a two-county tennis champion. He's an artist. He was a sign writer. He's a pianist. He's a cartoonist. He beats my rear at table tennis regularly. He's an awesome, awesome guy with so many skills and so much knowledge. He's writing a book about close encounters of like famous people he almost met. It's really interesting. He was on a tennis court at the same time as Bjorn Borg. This is at Shoreditch House. I don't know if you know Shoreditch House, full of hipsters. So this was just the other day, you know, and I think there's something really fascinating about bringing people like Stuart and connecting them with hipsters. This is John. John was a guitarist in the Stranglers. So if you know about, actually, he was the founder of, one of the founding members of the Vibrators. It was a punk band in the 70s. They're a cool punk band. And then he was basically ended up with the Stranglers for 10 years in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And, you know, when we sort of bumped into John, he was, you know, doing some teaching in a sort of community centre. But we just felt like somebody with him, with his experience and his passion and his knowledge and his skills, he's a great teacher, like, that idea or those skills need to be platformed, you know, and they need to be given a new audience. So this is like a beginner's guitar course that he runs 10 weeks. He's looking very studious in there. He's a funny guy. This is Michael. Michael's a hairdresser. Can you tell? Yeah, he's a hairdresser. Looks a bit like Seinfeld. Huh? Kramer, yeah. So he does like a retro hairdos event every month. It's just interesting. Like he's got a knowledge, he's got some skills that I'm sure many of the females or even males in this room would like to have. Loom knitting, we've got Dart's like an amazing, oh, of course she is, but got an amazing collection of looms. I don't know if you know loom knitting, it's big in America. It's like knitting on speed. It's really good and it's quite easy. This is Jeff. Jeff was the principal lecturer in photography at Central St Martin's for over a decade. Now he's retired, he's in his 70s, he lives out in Ramsgate. And but what a waste, you know, what a waste of all that experience. He was a fashion photographer. And so what we now do is do digital photography classes with Jeff. You know, photography, for sure we use new tools, we use new equipment, we use new kind of technologies, but some of the principles are the same as they've always been. So why waste that knowledge that somebody has got and has picked up over a lifetime and used to teach and let it reside in Ramsgate? That doesn't make sense. And also he made money in property for a while, and so he does like a property workshop, and I'm sure most of us who are either buying, selling or renting property could just do with that guy who can help you a little bit with, like, you know, should I buy this house and how do I make, you know, when he'd done that workshop he saved, I'm sure he's probably saved some people thousands of pounds just from a half an hour chat, you know, and I think that's interesting. How do you create those efficiencies? This is a pottery class that we do. I think there's a real interest in making things right now, you know, stepping away from our computers a little bit. And there's people out there that can teach you to make. This is Mike. Mike's a gardener since 1989. And then it turned out he had a secret past. He was basically tour manager with the Rolling Stones, the Beatles and the Who for 23 years. He swapped his life. He had access to excess in his words, and then he became a gardener. But it's a fantastic story. But these are people with stories and experience. Most of us would love to get close to, and you know, there's so much that we can learn from them. This is one more thing that we're doing. It's a natural beauty products course. So, you know, many of us probably spend, well, I certainly don't, but some of you, my wife think I should, spend more money on personal healthcare products. But so much of it's expensive and you don't know what's in it and what damage it's done. And actually, you probably don't know that you can make most of these things at home very cheaply, you know? And that knowledge is precious. And so Judith runs a course which is about helping you make your own natural beauty products. You know, that's the kind of thing which it helps us, you know. All the things that we're thinking about right now in like austerity, how can we save money, in our kind of, let's be more environmentally conscious about where our ingredients come from, what products we buy, what companies we buy it from. You know, this knowledge to help us do that, that exists. You know, it exists in people that we ignore. If I can jump out and show you the video. So this is Mandy. Mandy's doing a class this weekend. If anybody wants to go, I think there's 2 or 3 spaces left. She does, she's an artist. She does a working with clay course. So we made this little film of her.
When I was doing my foundation course, there was an opportunity to work with clay, and that was the first time I'd really touched clay. And I absolutely loved it. Clay is just such an amazing material, you know, that you can push around with your fingers. You can use tools, you can imprint things, you can make big sculptures, and you can make domestic stuff, so it's really flexible. Work in a way that you're really enjoying, because if you're enjoying it, then you're interested and excited by it, and you're going to produce the most interesting and relevant work, which I think is what you need to do. As an artist, you need to always be questioning what you do. So experimenting. So I think one of the most important things is to continue to experiment and to try new things. Just try it and see what happens.
So I've been working now for 15 years, but those simple words, like work in a way that you're really enjoying. If you're enjoying it, you're interested in it. If you're interested in it, you're going to produce work that's relevant. Like, my teacher never told me that. Do you know what I mean? No one ever told me that. I had to learn that for myself. You know, 15 years, 20 years after I really should have learned that lesson. And that's almost the thing that drives me and the thing that I'm interested in, which is about doing the things that you love, you know? But there's people out there who know that lesson, and who could share those lessons, and they're simple lessons, but to hear it from somebody who's experienced that and lives that life of sort of fulfillment, lives that artistic life, I think that's really, really powerful. You know, those are such simple lessons that we seem to kind of not pay attention to because we're not paying attention to the resources that we've got. And I'm really fascinated in this idea that, you know, what we're trying to do is not just reuse this resource, reuse this wealth, but almost create a market, you know, a market that doesn't exist previously. You know, I love, on the web, I really like eBay, because eBay's turned like a whole generation of like home workers into small businesses. You know, they've probably done more for small businesses or micro workers than any number of kind of government initiatives. You know, I think it's really powerful. That's when the web is at its best, right? Where it spots a market which has been untapped or underused or wasted and turns it into something of use. You know, and right now we're seeing all this talent of people that are retired and retiring just going to waste. And if we can help them earn money, so the way it works is that they sell a course. And, you know, people like yourself pay and go on the course and they earn money. And we're creating that money, you know? We're not like, you know, it's like a new market that's developing. And I think that's really interesting because it's based on the things that we need. I also love the idea that, you know, the other thing that we're doing here is there is a problem about healthcare, and there is a problem about welfare, there is a problem in social care. You know, those things definitely exist. But my idea, or our idea, or the idea behind Amazings really, is that let's not focus on let's focus on what people can do. And if you can focus on what they can do, it might actually help the things that they can't do as well. You know? And so there's lots of evidence that says that if you keep people active, if you keep people connected, if you keep people, if you help people have a sense of role, if you help people have a sense of purpose, you know, then that's the thing that helps them actually be physically well. That's the thing that actually helps them stay off benefits, to, you know, stay out of the healthcare system. And I think that's really fascinating. I know from my own story that, you know, and I'm sure in this room there are lots of other stories that when my dad retired, you know, my dad has been, pretty sort of depressed ever since, to be honest, because it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to go from being, a person with a role to a person without a role. And actually, it doesn't need to be that way. They still do have a role. And why do we assume that people don't have a role? That's insane. And people like Alex Ferguson are, I think, as much as I hate Man United, is, in many ways an example of where we're heading. He's 74, right? And he's still leading, a hugely successful team. Sorry. But it's fascinating, right? But the thing is, we have this idea of retirement. We work until we're sort of 60, 65, and then we retire. And then the country or the state needs you to die. It needs you to die quickly, otherwise it's a pain. But that's just not going to happen. And that period between retirement and when we do retire or become inactive, that's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So there's going to be more and more people, and it's going to become longer and longer and longer, And I think that's fascinating is that we're really interested in redefining what that space looks like, So there's going to be a new type of work, we think, which is neither traditional work, working for the man, or being retired, which is, working for no one. And I think there's something really interesting of can we turn that space or that period in people's life and use it effectively, turn it into, micro work, turn it into kind of stuff that can be harnessed for good. And at the same time, if you're reinventing retirement, I think we're kind of really interested in reinventing what adult education looks like. Even the term adult education, that sounds terrible. If you're going to do a retro hairdo class or learn how to make natural beauty products or learn guitar, I'm sure you don't feel as though you're doing adult education, right? But I think there's something interesting in this country, which is, or not just in this country, but we associate education with what happens until you're 21 or 22. And that's it, and after that, it's I'll only learn to get ahead in my career or something. And that can't be right, I think we should be thinking about lifelong skills, about lifelong learning, about informal learning. All of those things are really powerful. So how can we actually do both of those things at the same time, And that's what's exciting. It's you put the waste to good use, and then it creates more energy, and it creates more benefits. And I think my final point really was that, linking back to what we're talking about here, is that we talk a lot today about living in an age of austerity, an age of scarcity. The oil's running out, the gas is running out, the money's running out, everything's running out. We need to rethink, and sure we do, but we should also remember that we do have an abundance. And we have an abundance of people with knowledge, with experience and wisdom, And what happens if we focus on that? What happens if we focus on the things that people can do? What happens on the resources that we do have? How can we put those to use, Because that's actually the most precious resource that we've got. Wisdom, knowledge, what could be more precious than that? For sure, the oil might be running out, but certainly our ability to think and our ability to find new solutions because of the learned experience, that exists, and that exists in spades, and we shouldn't forget that. So that's it. That's us at The Amazings. Check it out. It's theamazings.com. I'd love you all to take part, so I don't actually often do talks. Most of the time I try to keep my head down and work on developing this. We're a small thing. We're going just over a year. We're based in London right now. We've got, big ideas, I suppose, and big plans for what we want to try and do. But it will only work if people like you get involved, So go to the site, check it out. There's a range of, dozens and dozens of skills happening all over London. I'd love to see some of you there at some point. Thank you very much.
All right, questions?
How do you find your amazings? So many people that do the lectures.
So they're very, now they come to us. So we've got hundreds of people who want to take part, and it's really heartwarming and slightly frightening because we have to kind of, all these people who want to do things and we're trying to catch up. At the beginning, that was really tough. And we did everything, the team did everything from get out on the streets with sandwich boards, and I respect the team for getting out there and doing that and sort of plucking people off the street, to linking in with older people, kind of membership clubs and organisations, to doing... the thing that actually worked for us was reaching out to people online. I think we forget that, if you're 55 now, the web has been around when you're in your late 30s, and so we assume that if you're in your 50s that you're not very web savvy, but the web's been around quite a long time now. So most of these people are, well, nearly all of them are on the web, and that's how we ended up sort of, reaching out to people. I think over 50s are the fastest growing audience on Facebook. So, that's how we find people now. Okay, it's a good question. So I think I run this company called Sidekick Studios as well, which is a kind of innovation lab incubator. And we were interested in creating startups, but startups that solve problems that matter. And we were looking at aging. So here's a story. Our first idea, or first kind of sort of formed idea, was there's lots of people that are retiring. Let's help them make the best of their life, and let's think about experiences that they can go on. It's almost like red letter days, or I don't know if you're familiar with the bucket list, the concept of the bucket list, things to do before you die. We called it. This is on camera, right? We called it near-death experiences. But we're very serious about calling it that because, it's tongue-in-cheek, and people, why call it like silver adventures? It just sounds terrible. You do have a sense of humour when you're in your 60s. It's okay. But what we found was that we were trying to talk to people about things that things that we could do for them, places that we could take them. Would you like to do this? Would you like to do this? And to be honest, most of the ideas that we were coming up with weren't that good. And meeting those people, we were just like, you're more interesting than that. Instead of us thinking about where we can take you, you should be thinking about where you can take us, And that's where it came from. Our first few amazings that were doing things like foraging class, so Terry still does a foraging class. We were just like, whoa, that's cool. Forget us taking you somewhere, let's go foraging together. And it kind of fell out of that, really. So I think it was really about getting it wrong and talking to the people and them telling you about what's the right thing to do.
Yes.
How can you volunteer? I volunteer.
Oh, yes.
68. I'm going to die on my feet.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, I don't volunteer becoming a...
I'm a life coach, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, so plenty to give.
That's amazing, right? See, let's talk. That's me there. Tick, sign someone up.
Seriously, how do I volunteer?
No, I don't. I think I wouldn't want you to volunteer. I think I'd want you to be an amazing. So it depends how you define volunteering.
It's my first time here. This is new.
All right, cool. So I think there's maybe it's a semantic thing. Like, I'd love you to, for us to talk about becoming amazing. Volunteering, though, is different. So volunteering is giving your time for free. And I don't want our amazings to give their time for free. I think there's a value to what they do. I think there's a value for what they know. And I think people should pay for that value, And if you pay for that value, then you should expect value. And that's how these things work. Like, money isn't always the answer, but money is not a bad, it's not a bad system, for making sure that there's quality experiences, there's expectations, and you deliver against those expectations, and that somebody gets those rewards. And those rewards aren't huge, people aren't making a lot of money from this, but at the same time, those rewards are important emotionally, that, somebody's still willing to pay for, what I know. Somebody's still willing to pay for, how I can help them. And I think that's really important. I think that, as a gesture, is really important. think there's a question that kind of.
First of all, what you're doing is insanely cool.
Very cool.
I have worked in Silicon Valley for over a decade, and you're solving one of the most worthwhile problems I think I've heard being dealt with anywhere. I think it's incredible. I'd like to ask, it seems like you could really easily, as an organization, become a bottleneck, as you're saying,
Yeah.
people just kind of start flowing in. Have you started to think about how organizationally and functionally this starts to decentralize as
Yeah.
people get the idea? I mean, you're really trying to rebuild a culture that's forgotten that
Yeah.
people after retirement age actually have some use. And
Yeah.
that might be seen as a cultural function
Yeah.
rather than an organizational function. But
Yeah.
how do you see that?
That is like an awesome question. It's like one of those questions that like I said, like literally tingles down my spine trying to figure out. That's what we're trying to figure out at the moment, right? So there's an idea underneath the Amazings, and it's not my idea. It's not the idea of the Amazings. It's an idea that's bigger than all of us, right? Which is a simple idea, which is about learning from elders, you know? And that's why it's timeless, and we're trying to kind of bring it back. And then there's a very clear sort of path, I suppose, for us, you know, which we're trying to think through at the moment, which is like, how curated are you? But how much are you an open movement? And I think it's both of those things have challenges and lead you down very different roads. And I don't think we have an answer to that at the moment, you know? I think we're trying to think it through. We're trying to think like, how do you make sure, you know, if you open it up and think about amazing chapters all around the world, how do you ensure you have that quality experience? But if you end up curating it, how do you really help the masses, you know? How do you really make this a big thing that we really want to make it? And I think our feeling at the moment is that we've got to try and get the kind of, it's not a great term, but kind of the recipe book right, you know? We've got to try and get a feel for what the model is. And then my idea is then at some point we kind of get out of the way, you know? And the more that we can kind of get out of the way, let the idea free, I think that's when it will really take root. But we've got to figure a few things out first, because I think until, you know, I get an email. Well, I think Tino got in touch. We get an email every day from someone in Sao Paulo or in Australia or in Cape Town or wherever saying, we'd love to do the Amazings here. You know, we can all think of Amazings in our own lives, right? You know, we can all think of people who could benefit from something like this. But I feel like we have to give them like a model that's going to help them make it work. So that's the stuff that's kind of what I'm sort of trying to figure out at the moment. But it's if anybody's got any ideas, you should get involved.
Just fixing post-industrial culture.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. But we are, I mean, the other thing is that we do have like a mailing list, just a small thing around what we call sort of super fans, people who do want to get involved more in like thinking about what we're trying to do here. And you're more than welcome to kind of get involved in that. We've got like about 50 or 60 people who try to help us think those things through. Because I think that's going to be quite powerful when we sort of figure out how we use the kind of interest and energy we're sort of generating.
So I guess building on that question, has the government emailed yet? Because it seems as though you're solving a couple of really big problems.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
What was your question? I'll ignore that.
What has any government in any country reached out? Of all those emails, like Tina and Drew, like has anyone?
Well, funnily enough, the UK government, they supported us indirectly by the Cabinet Office through an organisation called Nesta, have supported us, and so we appreciate that. But I wouldn't, that's not they're not government, I suppose, in the sense of, I think this is interesting for people in business innovation skills, in Department of Education, Department of Work and Pensions. It kind of cuts across lots and lots of departments. So it's, we definitely think it's interesting. But the other thing, I suppose, for us is, and we do appreciate the support we've had from the Cabinet Office, is that, but government is different. And I think for us to try and I think I'd rather try and figure this out outside of government and then take it, to government if that's the right road to go down, as opposed to try and make this like a government thing. I mean, governments do. In some ways, we're thinking about reinventing apprenticeships, and apprenticeships are an old thing, but a government-run apprenticeship programme doesn't look like the amazing things, so you don't want it to feel, do you know what I mean? Underneath, we might be trying to do different things, but it's a very different creative approach. It's a very different style. It's kind of very different, even than the relationships that we're trying to create and how we create those relationships. And so I think for now, it's about us as like a community of people trying to do this.
You spoke earlier about your dad kind of retiring and falling into sort of a semi-depression. My grandma's kind of pretty much exactly the same. She's that black and white photo you showed earlier, but she has these talents. She plays the accordion, she's great at knitting. How do you kind of coax these people out of that feeling and make them feel valued if they are maybe so ingrained in that feeling already?
That's another great question. Like sometimes when we talk to people, we say, do you have a skill, knowledge, or experience that that not many people have? And the first response often is no. And then you just dig a little bit deeper, not much deeper, and you go, that's really cool. Like, there's a great story here. And we're not talking about, I'm not that interested in Nobel Peace Prize winners, I'm not talking about people who are heavily kind of decorated in their careers. I'm talking about ordinary people who've got great stories, There's a jazz guitarist called Panama Dave. I like that. But he played at Apple's 10th birthday party to 18,000 people, and he still gigs, every night. Well, not every night, but he still gigs regularly in London. He's been playing the guitar or stringed instruments since 1959. I think that's amazing, and I think being able to play, dozens of stringed instruments. So I think it's about, but you do need to give that external reinforcement almost. You have to say, that's very cool. So I think we try to do that, I think. I mean, what we look for is, mastery of a skill. And that doesn't need to be about certificates, but, but it does need to be about, the ability to be able to do the thing. But then just passion to share it. And again, if you can unlock that and you can start seeing that, and you see those moments when you're bringing those communities together and they're like, wow, people actually want to learn. We've got a joiner, Thomas, he's a really, really cool guy. And he's been just working as a sort of carpenter for 30, 40 years. We did a workshop recently in some deep recess of Battersea, making sash windows. That's not... I don't know. But sash windows are, they cost thousands of pounds. And he sort of taught people the basics of making a sash window in a weekend. And you see the transformation, not just of the people that are learning, but for him as well. This is a skill that I've got and other people want to learn it. That's a great thing. So I think that's one of the things that we, have to almost do. And I think the brand is trying to do that as well. And we're like, that's amazing. You're an amazing, So I think we have to try and do that. Yeah, cool. Very good. So go to the website, come to a classic course, sign up to the mailing list, get involved. We'd love you to, yeah?